So I called McCoy, set up the audition, went to New York, went to the studio. When I got to the studio, McCoy was the first one there. There was no one else there. The other musicians from the band weren't there. So he said, let's play. So he started playing. And, you know, I listened to McCoy's records, so I knew a lot of the tunes.
Right.
And we sat down, and from the first note, man, we were like locked, and we were swinging hard.
Yeah.
Then the rest of the band showed up, then another drummer showed up. So then I played with the rest of the musicians. Then he asked the other drummer to sit in, and he played. Then he said, "It will be play again." So I ended up playing again.
Oh my God.
And everybody was smiling. They were looking at me because I was 18, but I looked like I was 16. And they were just like, wow, this guy can really play for his age.
Right.
So after the audition, McCoy drove me. He was going my way. So he drove me up to my cousin's where I was staying. And he says, man, you have a lot of talent, you know, but I'm going to use Billy Hart. But keep it up. You're on the right track. So that was encouraging. I was like, wow, man, I was actually jamming with McCoy Tyner.
Right.
Wow. You know?
Right.
2 weeks later, around midnight, the phone rings. My brother, who's an artist, you see some of the artwork on the walls, is Tony Fletcher, or Tony. And he said, Wilby, man, it's McCoy Tyner on the phone. So I said, hello? He said, Wilby, this is McCoy. I would like to know, because you really can't make it for a month. Can you do?
Oh my goodness.
I said, yes. So the first gig was in Chicago.
Really? My hometown?
Your hometown, at the Jazz Showcase on Rush Street.
I know that. I know.
That was the first gig. So that was my first really professional job, was playing with McCoy.
That's incredible.
After that, when I came back off that little tour, I moved to New York and then started pursuing my career.
Let me ask you, to be honest, were you nervous?
I was extremely nervous. I was terrified, man, because first of all, coming from Wilmington, Delaware, which has a rich history of jazz, and most of the people that would come out, I knew them. They were friends of my dad, so that was like family and friends. But when I got to Chicago, McCoy was real popular, very popular, as he is still now.
One of the greatest jazz pianists
in the world.
That's right.
In the world. And at that time, he was known as, you know, Downbeat had him as the #1 jazz pianist in the world. So there was a line coming out of the club, up the stairs, out the door, down the street, and around the corner for one show. And that was just for one show, because after that show, they clear out the house, and a whole nother new audience was in. So I was like, wow, man, what if I make it? Because we didn't even rehearse. I said, what if I make a mistake? And, you know, I'm thinking all these things, you know.
Natural things.
You dig? So I remember the first set, something told me, just relax and listen. Relax and listen. And you wouldn't be here if it wasn't meant for you to not be here.
That's right.
So we played that set, and it was like, I was almost like in a subconscious state. It was like, it was magic. The thing that really was kind of like overwhelming to me was the fact that he played one song for like 45 minutes, man. So concentrating and building on that theme, I was like, whoa. And
you being the percussionist, keeping the beat.
Yes, very demanding.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to the real scene. That's like going from high school basketball to the NBA.
Now I gotta ask you, how was it playing? On the personal side, how was it playing with Mr. Tyner?
Man, it was a blessing. It was, you know, it changed my life, and it gave me a beautiful perspective on music, how to approach music, and how you can rhythmically and harmonically, the liberties you can take with music. You dig? And it was just great. And it's ironically, I was associated in 4 different bands with McCoy over a 10 years period.
So you guys had a chance to play together.
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Yes, yeah.
So after the gig in Chicago, where did that take you from there?
You mean career-wise?
Yes, career-wise.
Well, I moved when I came back off that little tour, because the tour was Chicago, Detroit, Dayton, Ohio. Okay. So when I went back to New York, came home, touched bases with the family, then I moved to New York. And then from there, I started to work and rehearse with Charlie Rouse. I had some good mentors. Billy Hart, Jabali was one of my mentors. And then there was another guy, friend of mine, the one that called me for the audition was Howard King. He was a great drummer, man, a great musician. And he was one of my best friends, but unfortunately he had a very bad car accident, so he'll never walk again.
Oh, so
But so they would call me, and Billy would recommend me. He said, "Listen, man, here, Charlie Rouse is looking for a drummer. I've been telling him about you. Call him." So I would meet people like that. One thing would lead to another.
Now, I know that you played around the world.
Yes, sir.
You have played with several big name artists, headliners,
Right.
international. How was it traveling around the world and being such a young man?
Well, it's something that you grow into. Now, my first tour of Europe was with McCoy. I think I was 19, going on 20.
That's incredible.
And it was like Newport Jazz Festival in Europe. So, on the particular tour, Sonny Rollins, Gato Barbieri, Dizzy Gillespie, quite a few artists. And we were playing opposite each other, then a lot of times it would just be our band featured. And the tour was, it was two and a half months. And you're doing one-nighters. And I'm telling you, the first week of this particular tour was in Germany in October, and it felt like wintertime. It was depressing, but it was overpowering, because I was like, wow, thousands of people would show up to see McCoy Tyner like he was a rock star. And I couldn't believe the reception that these jazz musicians were getting in Europe versus what happens here in the States. I was like, wow, jazz is that popular over here? So initially, that first week, I felt like I was going to die, man, because you play, eat, go to bed, get up, drive 2 hours, fly, get on plane, fly to the next site, play, and you do that for 6, 7 nights before you have a day off. That's very demanding, very demanding.
I can understand that. Now, jazz, like you mentioned, being so popular in Europe, in the 20s, that's where a lot of blacks got to go in Paris to develop their skills and their craft and to become popular. And it was amazing to me when I found out through the history of jazz how popular jazz is in Europe. We got to be ourselves as black people. Number one, we weren't discriminated against. In fact, we were revered.
We were welcome.
And the jazz was just off the chain. And it started in the 20s, and even now, how popular jazz is in Europe. And that's a beautiful thing.
Well, one thing about the Europeans versus the Caucasians here in America, when blacks would come to Europe, we were treated like human beings.
Exactly.
We weren't treated like, like we were second-class citizens and stuff. So, and that's a vibration you feel automatically when you're in Europe. That's the only way I can say it. It's like that feeling of not feeling that racism, that prejudice.
It takes a lot off your back.
It takes a lot off your back. It's just like taking off a blanket or something, or chains, and it's so therefore there are a lot of artists relocated to Europe because they didn't want to go through all this negativity that they were going through in the States. Plus, here in the States, behind segregation and racism, black artists weren't really given the proper promotion that white artists were.
That's true.
For a long time, Motown would even put pictures of the artists on the covers.
That's right. That's right.
You did, because they wanted it to have mass appeal,
and if it was make that crossover.
Make that crossover. So all those little things played a part in why Europe was such a haven for us as jazz musicians to go and play and perform.
Now, you mentioned a name that struck a chord with me, Gato
Barbieri.
One of the baddest Latin jazz saxophonists ever. He had an album out in the 70s called Caliente.
Caliente.
Remember that one?
Yes.
Well, how was it playing with Gato?
Gato was he was so upbeat. He was comical too. He wore that black hat.
Yes.
He was he was smooth, man. Yes. He was very smooth. At the time, his wife Michelle was his personal manager. But I met Gato on that tour of Europe.
Yes.
I was the youngest guy on that particular tour. And I was, a flower. I was a hippie. I had my big afro, and then I had my jeans, and they were painted, and so everybody was looking at me, and I wore my hat backwards and stuff. And I was a youngster, but everyone was like very impressed with my talent. So I met Gato there, and we talked briefly. He said, "Wow." He said, "Maybe give me your number. Maybe I'll call you."